We interviewed American Indian people in 3 different reservations that belong to 2 different American Indian tribes. And we asked them about their religious beliefs. And we started with focus groups where we asked people to identify for us religious traditions that they might follow. And we were told that the important traditions to ask about were tribal traditional religion, Christianity, and Native American church. And Native American church is a religious tradition with roots in pre-Columbian American Indian traditions that are sometimes often combined with elements of Christianity. So we knew from the focus group work that those were the 3 traditions to ask about. And then we just asked people how important beliefs from those traditions were to them. And we also asked people if they embraced beliefs from more than one tradition. There is some good, strong social scientific research on American Indian religion, but it's mostly been the province of anthropologists. Anthropologists have largely looked, they've done in-depth studies of small communities usually. And there just isn't a lot of survey research on American Indian religion. Even if you look at survey research that takes in the general population, they're not deliberately excluding American Indian people, but there just aren't that many American Indian people. And furthermore, they can be sort of hard to find for survey researchers. And so they're often underrepresented in surveys of the general population. So by contrast, the research that I'm reporting in this paper draws on a sample of over 3,000 people. Every one of them are American Indian people, and asks them about religious beliefs. And so the size of that sample is absolutely unprecedented, and it makes this research really the first of its kind. We don't specifically identify the tribes that participated in the survey for the reason that survey research in American Indian communities has kind of a troubled history, or research in general in American Indian communities has something of a troubled history. In the past, there have been researchers that come into Native communities and collect information, take it away, and then publish it in ways that haven't necessarily respected the feelings in that community or respected real important needs in that community. And so the research center that I work with, which is the Native Elder Research Center at the University of Colorado, Denver, operates from the principle that collective privacy is as important as individual privacy when you're working with Native communities. And so when we entered into the agreement with these 2 particular tribes to collect information there, we made a commitment that we would not use the tribal names in anything that we published, but we would just use kind of general cultural descriptors. And so we refer to the participating tribes as the Northern Plains Tribe and the Southwest Tribe. And in that way, we protect confidentiality. Before this publication, there was some general ideas in the scholarly community about what religious beliefs were prevalent in tribal contexts. There was a general sentiment that Christianity was quite prevalent, and there was also a widely shared perception among researchers that tribal religions were making something of a comeback. Particularly since the 1960s and 70s, researchers had identified what they called ethnic renewal in Native communities quite frequently, and a component of that was interest in traditional spirituality. But a lot of this is kind of gut feelings. We didn't have the statistical data to really look at what the patterns were in Native America generally or in tribal communities. And so this research really puts some numbers on what had before been general ideas about what might be going on in terms of religion. Well, the first thing is that in these tribes there is a great deal of religious belief. In fact, virtually everybody that we surveyed identified themselves as having religious beliefs in at least some degree. In fact, only between 1% and 5% of the tribal participants said that they had no religious beliefs. And that's looking at both tribes. Between 1% and 5% say they have no beliefs. But when you compare that to data from the general American population, that's a very low level of unbelief. In the general population, public opinion surveys will find numbers of about 14% of people saying that they have no religious belief. So there's quite a lot of religious belief. We also found that there's a lot of religious diversity. We looked at tribal traditional beliefs, Christianity, and Native American church, and we found people in large numbers identifying at least one of those traditions as being very important to them. So there's a lot of diversity on these reservations. And we also found a sizable number of people saying that they felt that the beliefs from more than one tradition were very important to them. So people are also making these rich combinations of religious commitments. In Indian communities today, there's frequently some very serious concerns that have to do with mental and physical health. On just a range of health indicators, American Indian tribal members fare less well than members of the general population. So there's very high rates of things like cancer, diabetes, suicide, a lot of those health concerns. And in response to those concerns in tribal contexts, tribal health officials have become quite interested in developing health intervention programs that are rooted in often tribal spirituality. And so they'll offer people programs that help them, say, reduce health risk factors through strategies like ceremonial participation or the use of traditional healers. And our research gives a lot of encouragement to those kinds of interventions by suggesting that, yeah, you would have a sizable audience. You can anticipate that you will have a sizable audience for those kinds of interventions. And it may help intervention designers target their programs to a particular audience. So for instance, in our case, we found that people who were most likely to identify tribal traditional beliefs as being very important to them were more likely to be people with higher education. And so that gives you an idea of being able to target your interventions to that particular audience. It's likely that health interventions that had a component of traditional spirituality might particularly appeal to that segment of the population with higher education. So there's that. And then furthermore, we can also see that our results found that even though tribal traditional spirituality is still really strong in the Native communities we studied, there's also a lot of interest in Christianity. About a third of the people said that Christianity was very important to them. And a good proportion of those people said that they followed only Christian beliefs. And so that's a piece of important information for people who are designing health intervention programs that suggest that tribal spirituality might not fit with some part of the people's religious commitments, and maybe they would benefit from a program that spoke more to their Christian commitments. So there's information there that can really help program planners be attentive to the religious needs and interests of their particular local audience, and to think about designing health interventions that meet a range of people's religious needs, whether they're tribal traditional or Christian or Native American church. I'm absolutely so pleased with what the library has been doing lately with the electronically available journal database. It's just become more and more rare that I can identify an article that I want that's not there, available to me electronically. And I can see something that I want to read, and in 5 minutes I can have a hard copy of it in my hand. And I did that a lot with this article, so I'm just really delighted with the ability to do that the library's made available to me for all of my research, including this.